Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I guess I'll just start off by saying that we're all very honored to be here. Alhamdulillah, a lot of us were here when ILIA first was inaugurated, and it's really nice to see how much ILIA has changed, or how much ILIA has evolved in all this time. Just by a show of hands, how many people here personally know Brother Ayman or his family? How many people here personally know Brother Ayman or his family? Raise it higher, please. Okay, jazakallah khair. Now, everybody here, mashallah, you see how popular you are, man, mashallah. But, but you know, even more, I guess, amazingly is that our love or our care for Brother Ayman, you know, transcends into the work of ILIA. And you know, if you look at all the different products of ILIA, something I notice more and more, looking at it from internally or even externally, is that the amount of personality that went in from Brother Ayman. And I just wanted to highlight before I started in my part, 3 different things that I noticed that really struck out to me when I first started off as a board member at ILIA, and then later on benefiting from the programs. Number 1, this is something I was talking to Dr. Mustafiz about as well. What happened with ILIA and what happened with Mafiq Foundation, and a lot of the organizations when the adults wanted to get involved, was that they came in with engineering backgrounds. They came in with engineering backgrounds, and they came with from the different engineering fields and expertises. And for us, that for the organizers' perspective, this is probably not what they wanted. This is probably not what they intended. They probably wanted someone from the humanities. They probably wanted somebody that was dealing specifically with, dealing with the fields that had to do with leadership, that had to do with writing, and so on. It had to do with empowerment. But what happened is that in the midst of all of this, ILIA grew, and all these different, people got an opportunity to get involved. And when Brother Ayman and we flew to Michigan, and we had the first workshop with parents and teenagers. I mean, there was an objectivity matrix report put on there, and it was about like love that parents should show towards their children. And everything had like a matrix with it, how much percentage there should be, 3.2, 7, 8. I was like, how do you objectify love? How can you have, percentages put with, how much care there should be and so on. And I'm sure all of you guys have seen something like this, the social engineering at work. You see that how it added an element of professionalism, and how it added a perspective that most of us don't get. And so that was something I found personally that, ILIA brought to the table, and something that we should be very appreciative of. The second thing I found was the amount of outreach that was done towards the youth. When I look at the different masajid in the area, and when I've talked to many imams, when I've talked to many different organizers, they all say everything we do is revolves around the youth. And so you'll see people that will start a school. You'll see people that start all these different initiatives. They'll start conferences. They'll start everything. And it's all meant for the youth, but you don't see the youth directly working with those leaders. That the leaders, they're working on building these shells, and then the youth are supposed to come and fill that shell, but you never see the leader inside the shell themselves. You just see them always creating the shell. And perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put those people for a reason, and He also put people like Brother Ayman in this spot, because amongst the few people that would actually go and talk to youth and try getting them involved, directly calling them, driving to their house, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., alhamdulillah, among the few people I've seen is Brother Ayman, mashallah. Lastly, before the feeling that I got within our locale, within the masajid, within the Muslim organizations, is that there was always a glass ceiling when it came to the level of responsibility that was given to youth. When I looked around, when we first started in 2009, we were in Brother Ayman's house. MashaAllah, he had cooked some breakfast himself. It was pretty fun. But, in that day, Brother Ayman came to us and he said, today you guys are board directors of ILIA. You guys are, I had the position of Vice President of Technology of the Islamic Leadership Institute of America. A lot of huge words, and we're dealing with capacity building, we're dealing with institutional sustainability, we're dealing with, all these like leadership excellence, all these words that, we're just figuring out in our dictionary definition. But suddenly, when that barrier was broken, and we found ourselves actually within the organization, and we're at a position where they're telling us that you have to look at the strategic line. You have to be the one that has to think 10 years down the road. You have to think of how you want to see ILIA, 15 years, 20 years from now. You have to not only think about your high school credits that you're worrying about, but you have to look at the entire organization and see how you guys want to evolve the organization. And as a result, we ourselves grew tremendously. And now, alhamdulillah, you look at many of the masajid in the area, you look at many of the organizations that DCA as was shown below, and many other organizations that were directly impacted by this. Because before it was the idea that it was a perception that adults in general would run the show, and the only thing we would do is like youth events. We'd be doing parking outside. We tell people, you park over there, or what we do is we'd be in for registration tables. We'd be passing out candy. That was the only thing that we did. But alhamdulillah, I feel that through the efforts of Brother Ayman and consequently ILIA, a lot of the youth, we got a huge ability that people came to respect our opinions, and people took us very seriously because of these positions that he gave us, and because he's always told us, think very much ahead. So, in conclusion of that part, I'd like to, really, really say how honored we are, and, to let Brother Ayman know, alhamdulillah, in the past 3 years, a lot of benefit has happened in the area because of ILIA, mashallah, tabarakallah. So, now getting back to the topic, when ILIA brought this topic for the three of us, all of us coming from different localities within Maryland, for ILIA to approach us and tell us to talk from the perspective of locales and ILIA being an external organization, I felt that this, perfectly demonstrated the way that, leadership development should work. Because a lot of times when we talk about leadership institutes and we talk about all these different initiatives that are happening in DC, especially, you look at California, you look at these hot spots where people are trying to do a lot of leadership development. They're trying to create this crop of leaders that they'll be built within this institution, and then they'll go out and they'll change the whole world. But what ends up happening, and this is something that we were discussing amongst ourselves earlier tonight in the program, was that what happens in the process is that there's a loss of the developmental side, that people do get those leadership skills, but since there was no development, what happened was that people weren't really getting instilled with what was needed. You see a lot of times with a lot of leadership institutes, people come for like a 3-day summit, they come for a 5-day summit, and they're taught like management skills, they're taught risk management, they're taught scope management, they're taught all these different skills, and they go back to the masjid and they go to the board, they go to the imam and say, I can run your masjid, I have everything needed, XYZ, I'm the person to do the job, I know how to get things done, hire me, I have more qualifications than all these board members that have been in for years, and they just come because this is a fun hobby for them. That's the type of attitude that you see a lot of times in masajid now because of the professionalism that, they may have learned outside, whether it be in the different schools and the different expertise and the different certifications they got. But what we found for that to be very dangerous, and that's why we applaud the efforts of ILIA to be really working in the grassroots level, is because what's really needed is for the masajid and for the communities to be working very closely with the Leadership Institute. Because the Leadership Institute, what it offers is a vacancy and a vacuum that masajid cannot offer. And what the masajid have and what the communities have is something that the Leadership Institutes may not be able to offer. And a practical example of this, for example, is when you talk about conflict resolution. So, Brother Ayman and I, and as well as many others, we've taken classes with him when it came to conflict resolution, and we understand, the ways to approach it, the different methods that need to be used when it comes to, resolving conflicts. But at the same time, what's needed is that background information. What's really needed is to understand how people operate, how people think, how, from the daily experiences, what we learn, that when you're talking to someone and they might see the world from a very specific view, and they talk to you and you grow from their experience, and then that's when you can use those development tools. And so what we feel is that many times you can teach knowledge, but you may not be able to teach wisdom. Wisdom is something that needs to be acquired. And wisdom can especially be acquired from the communities. And so, in conclusion, I'd like to say that it really, really, it's a very beneficial thing what ILIA is doing by providing this knowledge and by, working with the communities. Because what it offers is that people can get knowledge from the management side, from the leadership side, and then they can implement it and gain wisdom by working with the community. Assalamu alaikum.
I have no idea how I'm going to follow that up. But inshallah, I'll give it a try. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ibrahim Khan. For the past 3 years, I've been the chair of the PGMA, Prince George's Muslim Association Youth Committee, and I'm also a member of the PGMA Executive Council. And I was under the impression that when coming here, we'd be talking a little bit about our experiences and what we've seen amongst the youth in our communities. And where I come from in regards to my desire and my drive to and my drive to help the youth is that I'm actually one of those youth that need help, or I'm exactly where a lot of the youth are today. That's where I came from. The youth committee at PGMA I helped start because of one incident between me and another youth where I realized that how the great lack of understanding of who we are as Muslims and how we should be as Muslims and how we should be as Muslim youth, specifically trying to build this ummah from the ground up. And when I got involved and became an activist, I had no idea what I was doing. And actually, to this day, I still have no idea what I'm doing. I'm learning from leaders such as Brother Ayman and Brother Jose Acevedo and Brother Mari Salah Khan. And I feel like a lot of the youth, the biggest problem is a lot of the youth, they want to act. They want to do a lot of things. They get emotional when they see the struggles that we're going through as a community, as a nation. Yet we don't have a lot of direction. And this is where the leadership comes into play. And what I really applaud ILIA. Granted, I haven't been as involved as my peers, Arif and Muhammad in ILIA, but there's a dire need for leadership development, just as Arif addressed. And the point that I want to make, and I feel like everyone should take away from tonight, is that the youth need to be made to feel as if what they're doing, anything that they do, is significant. There's a big issue of feeling insignificant amongst the youth, like kind of Arif alluded to with the glass ceiling of responsibility that youth are being given when they are involved in the community. But we need to remember that the Prophet ﷺ treated every single individual as if they're significant, Muslim and non-Muslim alike. And it's because of that treatment that the people around him, the companions around him, and even people that he never actually even met him were able to do such great things in their communities, because they were given that motivation, that drive, that sense of belonging, and that sense of importance that they were able to accomplish the things that we did, or that they did. And if we can cultivate that within our youth today, I believe great things can happen. I mean, there are already a lot of great things that have already happened in this community, such as, for those of you who know Al-Maghrib Institute, it was something that started off in the Musalla of Dar es Salaam, and now it's a worldwide Islamic education institute here in the U.S., Canada, UK, Malaysia, just started in Dubai, and it's something that started out in the Musalla with youth, only youth. Also, the video earlier with Brother Mari, the video was taken at DC Hidayah, which was something that was started by youth. And I mean, with the support of the community, but the initiative came from the youth that we want to hold a convention, a large-scale convention that will be a platform for da'wah and for educating the masses. And it was because that they felt that what they were doing was significant. And it's because they knew that what they did, even if it's something as small as, creating a flyer, if it's something as small as handing out, pamphlets at masajid, or inviting friends to share their skills and their insight, and also to come and attend these events, they knew that it meant a lot to the growth of the community. And that's the biggest issue that I see as a youth coordinator, that the youth need to be made to feel significant, and this is very important. And without this, the future will be very bleak for Muslims in America and across the globe as well. I think that's 2 minutes, right? All right.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Unfortunately, I had the privilege to being the last person to speak probably in the night. So there are many panelists, many speakers that went before me and had really inspiring speeches and really relevant speeches to this organization of ILIA. So inshallah, I'll try to do my best and share my experiences, what I've been through with ILIA over the past, let's say, 2 years. First, to begin with, I just wanted to, touch on one of the points that Arif made, which was giving the youth a platform to be able to showcase their skills and showcase their ideas and their talents. I actually was introduced to ILIA and Brother Ayman through one of my friends, Ammar. He's not here today, but he brought us to one of the mountain strong youth hikes, if you can call it that. And it was like an all day, like it was like a boot camp we actually had. Some of the kids were just like, subhanallah, they were just falling apart. But it was a good experience. We had a lot of fun, but the lessons that we learned there was that, you know, many of the programs that we've had before, the problems with them is that there's no sustainability. There's no volunteering. There's no people that are supporting it. You know, one of the things that I was when I was young, you know, before my teens even, that I used to love going to was Brother Jose's nomad camps. If you guys remember that, those are one of the most fun times that we used to have, and the concept behind these programs and these events are just to have an organization for youth and to be able to grow. One of the things that I always learn is that and now that I, alhamdulillah, I've grown up and experienced a lot of this that Brother Ayman and Brother Jose go through, is that youth have so much potential. It's just that we need to establish that institution. One of the things that if I can share is one of my suggestions, because Brother Ayman asked, what opportunities do you see with youth, and in particular ILIA? I think that all of us, it's incumbent on us to remember, like, this three-letter acronym that I'll mention, CMG. CMG doesn't stand for Chipotle Mexican Grill. It stands for, what I made up is create, maintain, and grow. So we want to create organizations, first of all, which Brother Ayman, alhamdulillah, has done with ILIA. And we want to maintain this organization. It's one of the most important things. We can't just have ideas and, you know, just throw them out there, initially start up, and then two years later they're gone. You know, when I heard Brother Ayman was telling me, we had a conversation one night after we were finishing with the Howard County Detention Center. We had a conversation. He was telling me that ILIA's we're getting ready to close, and I got pretty scared. I was like, subhanallah, I mean, what has led to this? And this should not, I mean, this should affect all of us, that an organization that has you know, so much of an impact on the youth is getting ready to close because of lack of support. And this is what he told me. So I was like, subhanallah, I mean, I'm very guilty of it myself, that I don't give as much time as we should, or as I should, to ILIA, and to, you know, to be able to maintain this organization. And of course, with that comes the growth part of it. We do want to see our youth growing these organizations, and we don't want it to be a one-man show. Right now, as it is, ILIA is, you know, primarily run by Brother Ayman, and I think, you know, I feel very guilty that, you know, that we're not doing more ourselves, and I think that we all have you know, a lot to provide and a lot to put in this organization if we just you know, if we just are on the same page, and inshallah, ILIA will grow and become one of the leaders in this industry, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan for this very inspiring talk. I'd like, before to open the floor to the audience, just ask a question, since Arif and also Brother Ibrahim brought this up. Kept talking about giving the youth that confidence and also the recognition that they can do something. So the question is, at what point should we not raise the bar? The way I deal with young people, and probably at least the two of you know, is I keep raising the bar until we probably explode. And I remember one time in our trip to Michigan, Brother Arif said, "What do you think we are? We're little brats." I was like, "No, you're not. You're 17-year-old." You know? So I guess if you could share a little bit of your insights, like for us as adults, you know, people myself, my age and older, where do we stop? Where is it, you know, too overwhelming for you guys?
Assalamu alaikum. What I would say, and a lot of this, we actually had a conversation. I was talking to Shafi Khan from Muslims Without Borders about this today. From what I feel is that, you know, when any organization begins, you look at Apple, you look at any successful startup that, you know, when they're in their initial phases, when you look at many of the masajid that opened in the last decade, many of them were at this point where you had no choice but to raise the bar, you know, very, very high, very, very quickly. Especially when you're dealing with something that's just beginning, somewhere where you need really passionate people. You need people that are really driven, people that can give hours and that they sacrifice sleeping hours so they can make this organization get at where they need it to be, people that can lay out the vision. But I think what we're getting to right now, and it's a very, very important evolution of Muslim organizations, is that somebody should not be burnt out very quickly. You know, that someone can say that this is part of my identity, that, you know, I help out with ILIA, I might help out with my masjid, I might help out with my community, but that's not the overarching theme of my life. You know, my life has its own purpose, my life has its own direction that it wants to go to, but this is part of my direction. I think this is very, very important, because one thing that, you know, we're trying to work on with the institute I'm part of, Al-Maghrib Institute, as Ibrahim mentioned, is that we're trying to make sure that no volunteer is only volunteering with us. We don't want to create a cult. We don't want to have something where people are just helping us and they just breathe, live, and dream Al-Maghrib, and they say, hey, are you with us or against us? Because that's what we see amongst a lot of youth, that they go between doing nothing to just going into over-zealous mode, and they're really, really, you know, doing all these things, and then once they graduate, get married, boom, everything's gone. You know, they call it the flat tire syndrome. You know, they completely gone from the radar as soon as, you know, marriage hits, or as soon as they graduate from college. But I think what we're getting to now, what Ibrahim was alluding to as well, is having that identity, and having an identity where this can be part of what I do, that, you know, I can contribute in a more meaningful way, in a thoughtful manner, and that it will be part of what I do in my life, in the goal that we go towards. So I would say that it should be that there's a very clear bar for everybody to reach, and that thing should be, rather, as Muhammad was saying, should be maintained, as opposed to just always looking like, okay, you've already finished this, you might be getting bored, try this something else, you know, instead of having, you know, I guess a comprehensive feel to all of it.
Anyone in the audience has any questions?
Some of the biggest issues I personally am seeing when I speak to the youth. First of all, I want to make it clear that when I do survey the problems that are out there, I like to look at the tiny details as opposed to the big picture. And so there are actually, I feel it doesn't do justice to say that there's one big or a few big problems. Rather, there's a plethora of a lot of problems out there. Some of them being and it's Brother Ayman mentioned it. There are gangs that new Muslims that are accepting Islam from the inner cities, that they form because of their lack of understanding. So they don't, and that's because they don't have the proper guidance, they don't have the knowledge, or they don't have the proper outlets to grow as new Muslims. There's also a very big issue, and this is a very taboo issue, but I don't think it's fair to not address it. And one of them is issues with self-esteem, which may even lead to issues with pornography. It's a silent killer amongst the youth. I think I looked at I saw a statistic not too long ago, and they did a survey of young Muslim men and women who are frequent on the internet, and they asked them, how many of them are struggling with pornography. And it was overwhelming. I think over 70% of the people that were interviewed, both male and female, answered in the affirmative that it is an issue. There's also a lot of cultural issues. The parents, come from another country and they grew up a certain way, and they have a lot of valid, strategies and discipline and so on and so forth. But it's really hard for the child who's growing up here in the United States in a whole different culture, in a whole different environment, to take from the lessons of their parents because they feel that they can't relate to them. So that's another big issue. Also, friendship. Friendship is a huge issue, which is why it's so important for there to be Muslim organizations, both to establish schools and to establish organizations within the public school sphere as well. For the MSAs to be very strong, for the both on the college and high school level, for there to be more Islamic schools like that of Darus Salam and ISA and so on and so forth, so that Muslims that are attending school, they have someone to build their identity with that's similar to them, as opposed to have to assimilate completely into the non-Muslim society. Of course, there's a lot of good things that they can gain from that interaction, but it really compromises their identity as Muslims.
Just wanted to add on to that point that the sister asked about what are some of the challenges challenges that the youth are facing, and I see this every day that I'm teaching or I'm around high schoolers, middle schoolers, is that adults especially don't really take them seriously, or they don't really open a line of communications with them, other than the fact that, how are you doing in school? You need to do this at this time. You need to clean up your room, so on and so forth. I mean, that line of communications is what I'm pointing to, between the parents and the children, or between the other older members of the community and these youth. I mean, I'm included as well. Is that it's pretty difficult right now, and it's I don't want to say non-existent, but it's pretty it's not in a good state. I was just speaking with he's like a high schooler in the summer, and he comes to the masjid often. I usually see him on Jum'ahs at our masjid, and just one of the points he brought up himself, he felt comfortable enough to bring it up to me, was the idea of music. How in Islam we're not allowed to listen to music. So he asked me, why can't we do this? The whole, the conversation, subhanAllah, I learned a lot from it myself, about him and about the challenges that they're facing, is that they're in a culture where certain things that we know in Islam, are completely foreign to Islam, like the idea of music, the idea of intergender relations and whatnot. It's foreign to these youth that are growing up in this culture. So if we have this this line of communication that us as adults make the children feel comfortable, and make the youth feel comfortable to come and talk to us with their issues, this subhanAllah, I think will have a big effect on them.
Just give you guys one more minute. Go ahead.
Sure. Ahmed, did you have a question? Ahmed raises a good point. For those people that weren't able to hear what he said, he was saying that you notice a lot of organizations that there's that one person that wants to do it all. That because we were talking about how they might get burned down and so on. He's saying the other side of it, you have someone that wants to do everything, and what can we do in those type of cases? I think that's where the whole community comes into play, and this goes into what I was going to reference when the sister was asking her question about general problems and general solutions. From my talk with Ibrahim and many of the other youth leaders in the area, we're creating a youth council that we're discussing many of these issues together. One of the things when we were talking about how we should work with MIST or work with other organizations to get more youth to come to the masjid, we then realized there's nothing at the masajid, essentially. It's like, hey, everybody come to the masjid, come every day, and we're going to love seeing you. And then they come there and they're like, what's there at the masjid? There's just this one grumpy person that's telling me, you're doing this wrong. You're not wearing the right clothes. You shouldn't be here. You should be sitting all the way in the back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We know all the different issues. But at the end of the day, if all of us really want to make a huge change in our own communities, as Ahmed was also saying, that all of us should feel like we are stakeholders of the community that we're part of, because we really are. And at the same time, start something in the area. Let the youth have something to go home and something to be proud of. Alhamdulillah, I was really happy to hear that, ILIA is putting together this game room where kids can feel like this is their home, And this is something that I felt, alhamdulillah, I was part of the Al-Hijra community growing up, now I'm part of the Al-Huda community. Alhamdulillah, I was always helped by the fact that I had very positive adults around me. People that said whenever I came to the masjid, they were always, encouraging me to take on something. There's some people that took me under their wing and helped me grow. But we don't see that in the general sphere. We don't see someone that just, you can go to the masjid, this person's here for you. And I think a lot of that is what Ahmed was exactly saying, that you see an imam that wears many hats. And he's a social counselor, he's the administrator, he's the person that's required to get the Jummah khutbahs, he has to do all the prayers, he has to do everything. And there might be some cases where the imam is forced to do everything, but many cases the imam wants to do everything, right? But what we need right now is basically imams. We need people that can be in the masajid that the youth can easily turn to, like counselors like Brother Hossein, Brother Joshua, and so on. They need people that are there just for them, and there needs to be programs for the masajid, for the youth there.